Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. I do have one quick favor before we get to the video that you came here for, and that is very simply this. You see that little red subscribe button below this video? Go ahead, smash that subscribe button. It really does help me. It really does help this channel grow and my audience grow. So go ahead and hit that red subscribe button. And now, here is the video that you came here for. All right, everybody. I am back. Good to be back. Final segment of the show. Hope everybody's having a great Monday. Final segment of the show. Let's switch gears. Let's actually talk a little college hoops. And this time of year in college hoops, there obviously, look, there isn't all that much going on. Obviously, season ends. We do the portal stuff. We do some high school reclassifications. A couple guys are still picking colleges. But you get to this point in the spring, and there's really not that much that is going on in the world of college basketball. Rosters are mostly set, all that good stuff, especially after the NBA draft deadline, which was at the end of May, early June this year. With that said, there was actually two big topics that kind of popped over the course of this weekend, and especially one that I really want to get into, and it comes from our favorite topic that we cover all spring long, and it's the transfer portal. And obviously, this time of year, there really isn't that many marquee players left in the portal. As best I could tell, there might only be one left, Amani Bates, who I think we all think is going to go to Louisville at some point. We just don't know what's taking so long. But I bring it up to say, coming into the weekend, there was another marquee player that was still in the portal that had yet to make his decision. And over the weekend, that player did, in fact, make his decision. His name is Pete Nance. First of all, I will probably call him Pete Davidson at some point during this segment, so forgive me, but I'm definitely not talking about Kim Kardashian's boyfriend. Definitely am talking about Pete Nance. For people who don't know his backstory, 14.5 points per game this year, 6.5 rebounds per game this year, 45% three-point shooting this year. He played at Northwestern, son of Larry Nance, brother of Larry Nance Jr., and he has been in the portal for a while now. He was in the portal. He tested the NBA draft waters. Once it became clear he wasn't going to the NBA, kind of took his time making his college decision, which he did, in fact, make this weekend. And so the question becomes, where did Pete Nance, definitely not Pete Davidson, Pete Nance, where did Pete Nance decide to go to college? Well, drum roll, please. Oh, Pete Nance decided over the weekend to commit to the University of North Carolina, the Tar Heels. This is a mega commitment for North Carolina, and this, I believe, solidifies them as the number one team for sure, no doubt about it, coming into next season. Really exciting news, really fun news, and I think a very important piece of news that when we look back, we start to look ahead, I really should say, to the 2022-2023 college basketball season. I think this could be a piece of news that really has a trickle-down effect into February, March, and potentially early April of next year at the Final Four. So let's get into it. First of all, Pete Nance, and I did almost say Pete Davidson on accident. Pete Nance, really good player, like I said. I think a couple things stand out to me about him. One, a lot like his younger brother, Larry Nance Jr., really developed over the course of time in college basketball. I think we all think of Larry Nance Jr. as this NBA player, played with the Lakers, played with LeBron, but he was a player. It took him some time to grow into his game before becoming now an 8, 9, 10-year NBA vet. It's the same with his brother. Pete played at Northwestern, as I said. A couple things stand out. One is that he just got better every single year. Started his career averaging just 2 points per game in his first year at Northwestern back in 2018, 2019. From there, he went to 8 points per game in his second season, 11 points per game as a junior during 2020, 2021, and then last year, as the face of the team, the program, 14.5 points per game, 6.5 rebounds per game. And as I said, what was really cool was to see his game evolve. Now, he was mostly, he can have a back-to-the-basket element to his game. But as I said, this past season, this guy took 93 three-point attempts, and he made 45% of them, 45% shooting from a 6'10 big guy. By the way, the best guy on his team, so he was the focal point of all these scouting reports, still managed to average 14.5 on 45% three-point shooting, and that is who North Carolina is getting. And so why is this important for North Carolina? It's because I believe this guy is the missing piece to who they are and who they want to be in 2022-2023. North Carolina is a team that we talked about a lot over the course of the spring. Ever since really about the middle of April, when they had a bunch of guys announce that they were coming back, I have said that I believe that they are the favorites to win the national championship in 2022-2023, and I believe this only solidifies that. So first of all, 4 starters back off a team last year that made the Final Four, that was ahead in the national championship game against Kansas. They couldn't close it out, but 4 starters back. When you look at North Carolina, first of all, to me, I know Armando Bacot has kind of become the breakout star, was the runner-up for ACC Player of the Year. I do still believe it starts with Caleb Love. Basketball is a guard-driven sport. We saw that in the Final Four. 16 points per game, 3.5 rebounds, 3.5 assists, 36% three-point shooting. Caleb Love is back. I think he is going to be a first-team All-American type candidate. Same with Armando Bacot. 16.5 points, 13.5 rebounds. Really kind of a low-post big guy. And then you have two other starters back. Leaky Black, kind of a defensive guy, and RJ Davis, who's kind of a combo guard that can shoot, can score, can do what is ever asked of him. The one thing that Carolina was missing, and we talked about it all spring, they were missing that stretch 4 to kind of complete their team. Last year, their 5th starter, who is not back, Brady Manick, he was a transfer from Oklahoma, used that extra year of COVID. He comes in and has a huge impact on who North Carolina was and what they did last season. 15.5 points per game, but 40% three-point shooting from a 6'10 guy on the perimeter. And so the one thing this North Carolina team was missing, they have the low post presence with Armando Bacot. They have the guard play with Caleb Love and RJ Davis and Leaky Black. The one thing they were missing was that 4-man that can step out, stretch the floor, and hit threes. And I guarantee you that is exactly what Hubert Davis said. Hey, come here, be the missing piece, be the final piece on a potential national championship team, and we are going to let you do what you need to do to prove to NBA people that you are an NBA caliber player, that you can step out, that you can stretch the floor, that you're not just all the things that any 6'10 player in 2022-2023 needs to prove. He is going to be able to do that at North Carolina. And so when you factor in the 4 starters coming back, when you factor in a couple key players off the bench that are coming back, including Puff Johnson, who played really well in the national championship game, I felt honestly like North Carolina was the best team even 3 weeks ago at the NBA draft deadline. I don't even think it's debatable now. Now, some people will say, oh, Torres, they got hot at the end of the year. You're giving them too much credit. And if they didn't make the Final Four, you wouldn't have them number 1. Well, first of all, I would say I don't know if I even agree with that. And what I would definitely say is that it wasn't just like this is the thing about North Carolina that drives me crazy. I think there is this belief that, oh, they just got hot in the tournament and you guys all loved them just like you loved UCLA last year. Well, what I could say is, first of all, UCLA, to go back to a year ago, I did have them preseason number 1. They were in the top 10 all year. They were a stop or two, ironically, against North Carolina from playing in the Elite Eight to go to the Final Four. So let's stop acting like UCLA had a terrible year last year. But on top of that, I don't even think it's fair to compare last year's UCLA team, which made a Final Four and got a lot of preseason hype this past season, to this year's North Carolina team. Let me tell you why. That UCLA team was reeling coming into the NCAA tournament. That UCLA team lost in its conference tournament opener to Oregon State and was one of the last 4 teams in the NCAA tournament. This North Carolina team wasn't perfect. It definitely took them a while. Yes, I was one of the guys that was criticizing Hubert Davis early, although he was awesome late. But when you look at this North Carolina team, it wasn't that they got hot in the tournament. They were one of the best teams in college basketball over the last 2 months of the season. I have dropped this nugget basically nonstop. But if you look at the literal last 2 months of the season, they were one of the best teams in college basketball. On February 5th, after their only loss to Duke, their first game against Duke in Chapel Hill on Saturday, February 5th, they were 16-7, excuse me. They finished the season overall at 29-10 overall, which means that from February 5th on, they went, I'm not great at math here, but that is a 12-3 record if my math is correct. Over their final 15 games, they were 12-3. One of their losses was in the ACC tournament. One of their losses was in the national championship game. And think about who they beat along the way. They beat Duke in their final game at Cameron under Coach K. They beat Baylor, which was a number 1 seed in the second round of the NCAA tournament. And then they beat Duke again in the Final Four to play for a national championship that they easily could have won. And so this idea that they were terrible all year and just got out of the tournament, it's just not factually correct. I believe this North Carolina team with 4 starters back, and remember, usually the teams that win at the highest level in college basketball, they're not the ones with the best recruiting classes. They're not the one with the best transfer portal classes. They're the ones that have really good players who come back for another year. Kansas last year with Ochai Agbaji. Virginia a few years ago when DeAndre Hunter and Kyle Guy and all those guys could have come back and competed for a national championship. Baylor, which had the best team maybe in college basketball during that COVID year, bring everybody back the following year, win the national championship. And that Gonzaga team they played, who was really good as well, brought back a ton as well. And so North Carolina, when I look at them, I think this solidifies them. This was the missing piece. And I'll be honest, I don't even know how you can really make an argument for anybody else. I've seen a Gonzaga push by a lot of people in the media over the last couple weeks. And listen, one thing I don't generally do, I don't like to criticize other media members. We're all just sharing opinions, and some of them are right and some of them are wrong, and we all move on and have a day. I don't really get the Gonzaga thing. I know they bring back Drew Timme, but they lost probably their 2 other most important players, Chet Holmgren and Andrew Nembhard. They added a few pieces through the portal. Neither is as good as Chet or Andrew Nembhard. And basically, my assumption is if you think Gonzaga is the best team in the country, that means that you think there is going to be a massive leap from a couple freshman guards who were good but hardly elite last year, Nolan Hickman and Hunter Salas. Not saying that can't happen. I'm just saying that, it feels like to assume that Gonzaga's number 1, and like I said, I've seen some in the media really push for that over the last couple weeks. The assumption is that there's going to be some guys that make some massive leaps that I'm just not ready to say. I think Houston is interesting at number 1. I don't think they're number 1, though. I mean, they still have 2 guys that are coming off that have to be accounted for in Marcus Sasser and Tremont Mark. Arkansas, I love my Razorbacks. How about them Hogs? Big Pig Invasion, all that good stuff. I think Arkansas is going to be really good. But they have 11 new scholarship players on this team, and it's going to take time. Don't think there's any doubt they can get there by the end of the year. Don't think they should be ranked number 1 in the season. Kind of the same with Kentucky. They bring back Oscar Tshiebwe, but a lot of new pieces. Antonio Reeves, C.J. Frederick. How do all those pieces work together to make Kentucky a top team in the country? Creighton kind of the same as Houston. I like them, but preseason number 1 feels a little bit aggressive. And so to me, this Pete Nance, definitely not Pete Davidson, this Pete Nance news, I believe solidifies North Carolina as the number 1 team in the country, barring something shocking, barring Caleb Love deciding to go overseas and play this year or something. North Carolina will be my preseason number 1 team going into the season. And by the way, Caleb Love is definitely not doing that. North Carolina, my preseason number 1 team. Really excited for the start of the year. I don't know how much relevant college hoops news we'll get here until really September, October. But this is a big piece of news that, as I said, I believe can have some long-term repercussions for the Tar Heels and for all of college basketball into February, March, and April of 2023.